Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is G. Lamar Stewart. I know below it says Seth Myers. Seth is my special assistant here in community engagement, but I'm the chief of community engagement here at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, and we thank each and every one of you for being a part of today's virtual town hall. Every month, our office, specifically the community engagement unit, we host virtual community town halls and for each of the divisions, police divisions across the city. And so we welcome each and every one of you who are residents and stakeholders in South, Southwest, and Central police divisions. Thank you for being on. I'm joined today with a very distinguished group of colleagues who are working in the justice system and others who are community, are part of community organizations, and others who are part of our justice system. And I'll introduce them here momentarily. As I mentioned, every month we do these town halls. Each month there's a different theme or different topic. And so today our topic is domestic violence and sexual assault. And so I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves in this order. Today we have with us ADA Branwen McNabb. We also, from our, she's the chief of our Family Violence and Sexual Assault Unit here at the DA's office. We have Captain Mark Burgmann, who is the commanding officer for the Philadelphia Police Department's Special Victims Unit. We have Eileen Horgan, who is with Women Against Abuse. We have the executive director of Philadelphia Center Against Sexual Violence, also known as WOAR, Dr. Monique. Then we also have with us LaQuisha Anthony, who is the founder and president of Victory over Inconceivable Cowardly Experiences, better known as V.O.I.C.E. Last but not least, we have Vickie Melvin, who is with Philadelphia's Children Alliance. I'll ask each one of them to introduce themselves and talk very briefly about the work that they do.
Good afternoon, everyone. As G. Lamar said, I am Branwen McNabb. I'm the chief of our Family Violence and Sexual Assault Unit here in the DA's office. I started in the DA's office in 2005 as a legal intern and then as an assistant district attorney after I graduated law school in 2006. I have been in the Family Violence and Sexual Assault Unit since 2008, where I was a trial attorney for approximately 10 years. In 2017, I was appointed to assistant chief, and then when District Attorney Krasner took office in the beginning of 2018, I was appointed to be chief of the unit. Our unit handles domestic violence cases, sexual assault cases, child abuse, both physical and sexual, child pornography, and sexual exploitation cases, as well as human trafficking cases. I always say I may be biased, but I'm a firm believer that our unit is one of the best in the DA's office. We are blessed with amazing victim advocates and trial attorneys, all of whom are very trauma-informed and victim-centered minded. And one of the best things about this particular unit is our partner agencies and the relationships we have with each of those agencies and our multidisciplinary teams, many of whom you're about to hear from. So together, we strive to support victims and survivors of domestic and sexual violence as they navigate their way through the criminal justice system. And I will turn it over to the next participant.
Captain Burgmann.
Oh, it's me. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, my name is Captain Mark Burgmann. I'm the commanding officer of Special Victims Unit. I joined the police department in 1981, so just this past month, I crossed over in the year 40. The majority of my career I spent in the Detective Bureau, having been a detective, sergeant, lieutenant in the Detective Bureau. When I was promoted, they kept me in the Detective Bureau, and I was assigned to East Detectives at 3901 Whitaker Avenue, where we covered 24th, 25th, and 26th districts. It was my previous assignment before getting here. As I said, I'm commanding officer of Special Victims, and here we handle all sexual assaults. We'll handle all child abuse of both the physical and sexual nature, child neglect, attempts to lure children, all kidnapping and abductions involving adults and juveniles. Hospital cases that we term near fatalities. They're basically deaths of children under the age of 10 or near fatalities. Child pornography, human trafficking, crimes against retired elderly, long-term missing persons. And we have Megan's Law Unit, which handles community notifications, compliance checks, and violations. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Eileen Horgan. I am the supervising criminal advocacy attorney at the Women Against Abuse Legal Center. I started with Women Against Abuse in 2011 as a fast track attorney, which is an attorney who's stationed in one of the PFA courtrooms where you meet victims who are there seeking PFAs and are able to provide them with information, advice, and representation on the spot. I later became the supervising criminal advocacy attorney where I supervise our criminal advocates. We have 4 criminal advocates who work out of the Criminal Justice Center who are available to speak with domestic violence victims who are pursuing criminal cases.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monique Howard. I'm the Executive Director of WOAR, the Philadelphia Center Against Sexual Violence. I've been at the organization since 2016, spent the bulk of my career as a public health practitioner, working at the intersection of health and marginalized communities. The organization our services are free. Our mission is to eliminate sexual violence, and look forward to speaking more with everyone about the services of the organization, impact of COVID, and answering some of the questions from the community. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is LaQuisha Anthony. I'm the founder of V.O.I.C.E, Victory Over Inconceivable Cowardly Experiences. We are a sexual abuse survivors network that supports survivors through their healing process and help them to navigate life after sexual violence while supporting them, while connecting them to resources such as some of the resources that are here today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vickie Melvin, and I'm the Associate Director for Programs at the Philadelphia Children's Alliance. And PCA is a part of a larger MDT. We are co-located at the Philadelphia Safety Collaborative with the Special Victims Unit, the Sex Abuse Unit of the Department of Human Services, our Sexual Response Center, as well as a small clinic that houses both CHOP and St. Christopher's for forensic medical exams for children, and also our DA's office. Our role is to help to coordinate all of the investigations that both law enforcement and DHS have around sexual abuse or assault. And we also work with children who have been victims of violence or extreme physical abuse, or experience have witnessed homicides or near fatalities. I'm looking forward to talking with you all this evening.
Thank you all. Well, our first question will be for Branwen McNabb. Branwen. The question is, please describe the trajectory of a domestic violence and or sexual case, the various stages in the criminal justice system, from initial report incident through or to prosecution.
Sure. So a case gets to the police department in a variety of different ways. It can be through a 911 call when uniformed officers will respond to a call for help. It can be through a walk-in to the police district or the detective division. With child cases, we get many of our cases through the Department of Human Services and calls from mandatory reporters. So that could be from a teacher or a guidance counselor, a medical professional, someone that a child has confided in who is mandated by state law to refer that to the authorities. So however the cases make their way to the police department, once they have the case, will begin to investigate. They'll take statements, they'll collect the evidence, physical, digital evidence, whatever's available. They will do search warrants for medical records. They'll build the case, and then they will consult with the district attorney's office in terms of charging. That is both our charging unit, and for purposes of special victims unit, I'm the liaison with the investigators there. So if they have any questions as they're continuing to build their case, I'm available for consultation for them. Once a case is ready for arrest, the offender is arrested And the first step in the process that a complainant would face is the preliminary hearing. That is a sort of a mini trial. It's much shorter in duration, and the burden of proof is much lower. So what we as the prosecutors have to establish at a preliminary hearing is that it's more likely than not that a crime occurred, and it's more likely than not that it is this particular offender that committed that crime. That's usually done just by calling the complainant or a witness. The burden of proof is to show, again, more likely than not, which is very different than a trial stage beyond a reasonable doubt. If we have met that burden and a judge decides that a case can move forward to the trial stage, they will what's called hold it for court, meaning we've met our burden, you're moving forward to the trial stage. Because Philadelphia is a very large city with a huge docket in each courtroom, the cases, it may take several months or even years for a case to make its way to trial. As that waiting period is happening, the lawyers are handling motions and discovery issues, making sure that the defense is given all the evidence they're entitled to, and any pretrial motions are handled. We have an excellent team of victim advocates that from our office and also our partner agencies that you're going to hear from that regularly communicate with the victims along with our assistant district attorneys to keep the victim witnesses in the loop so they know what the status of things are. Eventually, when the case is available to go to trial, meaning there's a judge and a jury available to hear that case, the case will go to a trial and a verdict will be rendered at that point.
Thank you so much, Branwen. The next question is going to be for Dr. Howard and for LaQuisha Anthony. What is a widespread misconception regarding domestic violence and or sexual assault that you have frequently seen in your career? How might people go about dispelling this misconception?
I can go first. One of the widespread misconceptions is that it was all the victim's fault. That whatever it was that they wore, the place that they were, how they interacted, that it was the victim's fault. And rape and sexual assault is a crime of power, misuse of power and leadership and control. And nothing that that person did on that day should have resulted in a rape or a sexual assault. And the other thing is that people are always questioning what took so long, as though that is associated with guilt and with some level of shaming. And the answer to the what took so long is, we are still blaming victims or survivors for their rape. Some of the questions that are asked of them are blamey. Some of the, I think of the Bill Cosby case. Took 60 some odd women to come forward with a similar story for people to say, oh, I think they might be telling the truth. But those first 10 and the first 20, people were extraordinarily doubtful that they were telling the truth. And so why did it take people so long to report is couched in the treatment that they receive when they tell their truth.
Definitely would agree with all the things that Dr. Howard has already spoken in reference to a misconception. And to add to that, I would say that one of the other misconceptions is that survivors want to be a public survivor, to share their stories as if it is a badge of honor or as if there is some type of gain by being a public survivor and sharing that particular story. No one wants to continue to have to share their story in a public way in order to be believed or in order for other people to be heard. And that's ultimately why survivors normally come forward, to let people know that this is occurring and that it's happening in other areas, and that the people who have yet to come forward to know that they're not alone in those processes. The other misconception I would say would also be the fact that people don't come forward right away. We often think that survivors will just immediately come forward with their stories and to process, that many of them would go straight to the police, or many of them would go straight to report, or many of them would even go straight to getting access to care. And ultimately, sexual violence is associated with shame, and many survivors are suffering in silence opposed to coming forward. And although we see alarming numbers, the numbers are like 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 4 for women, 1 in 5 for men. Ultimately thinking that those numbers are very high numbers, which they are, but there are a large number of individuals who have still not come forward and still have not reported, and that statistic does not represent them. And when we hear about sexual violence, many people think that that person is going to immediately move towards the resources that are available to them. And ultimately, that is not the case for how survivors respond to experiences of sexual assault.
Thank you, Dr. Howard, and thank you, LaQuisha. The next question is coming from Dr. Tony Damon, who's principal of Dobbins High School. Always glad to have you on, Dr. Damon. The question is I'm going to ask that Branwen and Vickie respond to this. Are there any preventative measures that can be taken to prevent domestic violence? Additionally, what supportive services are available for individuals who experience domestic violence?
Thank you, Dr. Damon, for that question. It is extremely important to take preventative measures, and I think the most important thing for our youth is education. So educating kids as young as possible as to what a healthy relationship looks like, both intimate partner relationships and also familial relationships. What the health of that relationship looks like, and what to be aware of if it's not a healthy relationship, both in your own relationships and also looking out for others, right? So knowing how to spot if a colleague or a friend, a classmate is going through a situation, if you suspect that something is going on with them, who to turn to and what resources are available. So in addition to educating our youth about what healthy relationships look like, what to do about it if you find that the relationship isn't healthy, where to turn. So making sure that our young people know that they can go to their guidance counselors, their teachers, school nurse, any resources like our community partners have available. There are a ton of support groups and advocacy measures available for them. So education is the best preventative measure we can possibly take.
And I completely agree with Branwen. And it is important to make sure that everyone is aware of the resources as well that are available to young people. And in terms of educating, we can also educate all of the professionals who are working with the young people so that they are knowledgeable about what resources are available, how to see the red flags or the signs and symptoms of a child who is being abused. And we have to always be mindful that young people who are abused by their peers, people their same age, that's not something that's okay. Sometimes we dismiss it as kids being kids, and that's not acceptable. We need to create safe spaces for young people to be able to share what they're going through. And that can even mean having groups at school. And now that we have this virtual platform, offering virtual groups and connecting with the agencies that provide these services, and remembering that some of us are able to come to you to bring those services. And WOAR has a very strong educational training program with the schools. And so they can go into the schools and really help to educate not just the children, but also the adults that are working with the children, how important it is for us to create safe spaces for our young people.
Thank you so much, Branwen and Vickie. Next question, I'm gonna ask Eileen, Horgan, and Dr. Howard to respond. It's coming from Dr. Ruth from the Department of Public Health. I would love to know about 1, changes in domestic violence cases related to COVID, and 2, what, if any, information about gun safety is provided to survivors?
So in terms of changes to domestic violence cases due to COVID, the main change is that we see that, or understand that people are quarantined, confined, and often still remaining in the home with their abuser, which gives them less of an opportunity to access various resources. So what we've tried to do is try to be as creative as possible when people are accessing our resources to help creatively safety plan about how people can get what they need in a situation, including calling our hotline to access our safe havens and find safe housing, calling the legal center to get access to protection from abuse orders, if that would potentially evict the abusive party from the home, things of that nature. We anticipate and hope that people, as restrictions begin to lift, that we'll see more people accessing services that might not have been accessible to them during the shutdown. The other part of the question was about gun safety and how is that information provided. As part of our safety planning, when we are speaking with victims, we do ask about firearms in the home in order to provide specific safety planning around that issue, to ensure that the firearm can be kept in a safe location, or at least a known location. So if an incident is occurring, perhaps they could try to move it to a different room or be aware of what room the weapon is kept in. And also utilizing the protection from abuse orders as a way to request that the weapon be relinquished. That is a real piece of relief that is available to victims through that process.
With regards to sexual violence, I did a little bit of a dive into Philadelphia reported rapes. I did a comparison from April 2019 and April 2020, and that's really when in the city of Philadelphia, we were shut down and contained. In April 2019, there were 69 cases, and this is data from online, and in 2020, there were 36. And so what that means to me is that there is no space, right? We know that people are contained, much like what Elaine said, people are contained with their abuser. Children are contained within the family that is abusing them. And so although the hotline calls have been consistent to the 24-hour hotline that WOAR staffs, we have seen an increase in our chat and text. And so we added those two services on last July 2019, and we saw an increase in those numbers. And we attribute that to being able to quickly text and have a text conversation, but an inability for people to actually stay on the phone and make a phone call. As you just heard, we also do safety planning with individuals when they do call, but we are really waiting for when the new normal is 100% adopted, whether that is everyone goes back to work and kids are back in school, and we know that won't happen until January 2021. But we rely very heavily on our mandated reporters and our adults that provide services to youth to alert us as an organization when they determine that a child has been sexually abused. And so we have been amping up our training in that respect. But we have seen, police reports indicate there's been some bit of a decrease. It did pick up again and become more stabilized when you compare 2019 to 2020. But people just don't have the ability right now to place those calls to protect themselves, and we'll have to wait it out until things return to normal and be positioned and properly poised to manage that influx and that increase of requests for support that we will be experiencing.
Thank you both. The next question will be for from Lisa Clinman from South Philadelphia Victim Services. I will ask Dr. Howard if you can respond to this as well as Eileen Horgan. How can victims of domestic violence who have medical bills or need counseling access these services through the city if they do not speak English?
Well, our services at WOAR are free. And by free, that means that regardless of whether or not a person has insurance or their immigration status. We don't ask for any information like that. The only inclusion criteria to seek services from WOAR is a person that has had a sexual violent experience or episode in their life. And that is it. We provide services for all people. We do have Spanish-speaking staff. And if a client comes to us and seeks services from us, and we don't have a person on staff that speaks their language, then we make a phone call to one of the translation services that we have contract with, and we work through the service to ensure that everyone that walks through our doors or seeks services through our hotline is provided services.
Women Against Abuse, similarly, our services are free. To domestic violence victims, we utilize Language Line for any languages that we don't have staff who speak those particular languages. With regard to medical bills, one thing that we do a lot of in the legal center is assisting people with completing victims' compensation assistance filings, and so can submit their medical bills and potentially be reimbursed for them. And especially someone who has a limited English proficiency or needs assistance in that way, that's certainly something that we would be able to assist them with. So I would encourage you to send them to the Women Against Abuse Legal Center, and we could help with them.
Thank you both. Next question I'll ask LaQuisha Anthony to respond to is from Patricia Birch from Catalyst for Change Church. As a survivor of sexual assault, how might one best serve or support others during this time when people are focused on simply surviving on a daily basis for a lack of food and other basic necessities?
Well, first off, we would know that if your basic needs are not met, then you can't deal with your traumatic experience, that those things need to be met first in order for you to be able to navigate a traumatic experience. So as a survivor, I would say to support survivors by letting them know of the resources that are available within our city, different food banks, different areas, different job resource places, like the DA's office has a job resource thing every month where they're allowing people to have access to employers directly, and also access to trauma care as well. So making sure that you plug survivors to those particular resources, as well as just supporting the common needs and supporting survivors and what they might need during this time, knowing that they are currently not only dealing with a double pandemic with Black Lives Matter and COVID-19, but they're also navigating the new normal of that experience of how do you actually live after sexual violence. So ensuring that we are allowing survivors to speak about what they do need, and then being able to direct them in the right direction based upon the resources that are available within our city. And there are tons of resources. As you can see, there are many resources that are present on this call today, and there are tons more resources out there that can help individuals.
Thank you so much for responding to that question, LaQuisha. And thank you, Patricia Birch, for the question. And to the point that LaQuisha just mentioned, we'll make sure that we add not only the context for all of our panelists in the comment or chat section, but we'll also make sure that we add information regarding our one-stop job and resource hub. In fact, the next one is coming up next Thursday from 3 to 5. It's a virtual hub. The next question is coming from Melissa Robbins, South Philadelphia activist. I asked Branwen, McNabb, as well as Captain Burgmann to respond. We see that sex trafficking is at an all-time high. Philadelphia is one of the cities that is greatly impacted. Is our Attorney General partnering with our district attorney to work collectively and share resources to save some of our children?
Thank you, Ms. for that question. Yes, the district attorney's office has tremendous in combating human trafficking cases. On our anti-human trafficking task force is the district attorney's office and the U.S. attorney's office in terms of the prosecution aspect, as well as for law enforcement, we have the Philadelphia Police Department and our special victims unit, and they are specially trained human trafficking investigators. We also partner with the FBI and Homeland Security. and our advocacy agencies such as the Salvation Army and Justice at Work, which is formerly Friends of Farm Workers. I believe Captain Burgmann can talk a little bit more about joint operations that have taken place with the Attorney General's office, but we do partner with them as well on the law enforcement side of things in investigating these very tragic cases. Captain, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, as you said, we had a task force, the federal task force, actually expired, but it's still up and running. Have the people there. We partner with FBI, with their child exploitation task force. We also partner with Homeland Security Investigations. Homeland Security Investigations has been a great partner. They supplied a lot of training and a lot of equipment to us, which we're using. We do sting operations also with the State Attorney General's office. With predators out there online trolling for victims. So we've had great success with the task force. We continue to operate and fully with in conjunction with all the other agencies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Captain N. Branwen, for that response. Next question is from Kristen from 1st District PDAC. Kristen, great having you on. It was also great seeing you on another town hall last night. I'll ask Vickie and Dr. Howard to respond. Are there any programs that recognize the unique issues facing sex trafficking victims and or offer services specifically tailored to victims of sex trafficking, including in domestic situations?
Sure. Thank you. So Philadelphia is really a unique city/county in that there are 2 ports that are on either side of the city, and we can't continue to think that there are only supplies and materials in those containers at those ports. Sometimes there are humans, right? So trafficking does occur. It occurs domestically, and so we've all seen the movies Taken 1, 2, 3, 12, and they all tend to be some international plot and can't think of the actor's name, flies across the country to international waters. And so sex trafficking happens here. It happens on our land. It happens within our families. It happens within our communities. WOAR has a human trafficking program, and where we provide wraparound services. And so we have an outreach worker who conducts workshops and support groups at some of our housing agencies, as well as a therapist that is specially trained to provide therapy and counseling to individuals that have been trafficked. And so we receive soft referrals from some of the agencies in Philadelphia, and we provide services to adults and children that have been trafficked.
Yes, and I just want to add, in terms of services that are available, Salvation Army is one of the victim service agencies that work specifically with trafficking victims, and so does PCA. We are a part of a court system that is specially set aside for young people who have experienced traffic, called RAP Court. And we have an opportunity to refer these young people for assessments to see what services they need. And there is a CSEC assessor at PCA, as well as at Salvation Army, that can complete assessments for young people. And at PCA, we also provide counseling services. We have a trauma clinician who works specifically with those who have been trafficked, not just sexually trafficked, but also those who are labor trafficked. So child victims of human trafficking. We offer as many services as possible to support them. And any professional is able to make a referral for an assessment, and then we move forward with that in terms of connecting them to counseling services.
Thank you both for those responses. I'll ask ADA Branwen McNabb to respond to the next question coming from Joe Alcus from 3rd District PDAC. And Joe's great to have you on. Dealing with domestic violence is hugely challenging. and problematic for police and prosecutors? How do the representatives from the DA's office feel about a non-criminal justice approach to domestic violence, as is practiced in some European countries, which allow victims to discreetly reach out for help through pharmacies? Would a non-criminal justice approach to be more useful in a city like Philadelphia?
Hi, Joe. Thank you for that question. The DA's office a few years ago implemented the Domestic Violence Diversion Program. So these are low-level misdemeanor cases where they're evaluated, and if deemed appropriate, they're put into a diversion program where the focus is on treatment. So batterer's intervention is given to the offender through JJPI or Menergy. And the goal is to treat the offender to prevent any reoccurrence of violence. And ultimately, if the program is successfully completed, the record will be expunged. So that's one aspect of a non-traditional criminal justice approach that we have taken. Future consideration is being given to a restorative justice program. This is something that's starting to be implemented in college campuses across the country. It's sort of a healing approach and less traumatic for the victim. Often the victim and the offender will sit down together. And again, this would be something for the lower level misdemeanor cases, not cases that are particularly violent or of risk of reoccurrence or a lethality factor that we were afraid that, this would continue on in the future. So those are two aspects of non-traditional criminal justice approaches that we have explored. Additionally, as adult victims of domestic violence and sexual assault have the ability to confide in, you mentioned pharmacies, the ability to confide in therapists, medical professionals, counselors, without being a mandatory reporter. So they can go and seek medical treatment without that person, that therapist or that physician reporting to law enforcement what they're reported to. So they will not, if it's a child, of course, we have mandatory reporter laws where the physician or the counselor would have to call in a report to DHS. But for adults, there is no mandatory reporter law. So adults can seek treatment from the healthcare providers without being drugged involuntarily into the criminal justice system.
Thank you, Branwen. Next question is from Pastor Darren Greenfield, who is the lead pastor at Christ Center Church. I'm going to ask Vickie, Melvin, Eileen, Horgan, and Dr. Howard to respond. What organizations in Philadelphia can we connect with to help pay for individuals to start trauma counseling?
I think that's a very generous offer, and you can connect with any of us on this line, even though most of our services are free. But there are many agencies where their services aren't free, and our clients need to have medical insurance, and they don't. And so I know V.O.I.C.E, if there is anyone who is willing to support a victim through this healing journey in any way whatsoever, all of our agencies are definitely available. You can always give us a call, and we can, it would be great to sponsor someone if they're not able to accept services that are free. And because our services are free, sometimes we have long wait lists because people don't have insurance. And so if there is somewhere where they can go and we can connect them with your help, please feel free to reach out to us.
Similarly, most of the organizations that Women Against Abuse partners with provides free trauma-informed domestic violence specific counseling. The organizations that we primarily refer folks to who have specifically experienced domestic violence are Women in Transition, Congresso, and Lutheran Settlement House. All provide both individual and group counseling. We also would welcome anyone to call our office, and we could help refer people directly to those organizations or try to work through figuring out other payment options or whether someone's expenses would qualify under the Victims' Compensation Assistance to get reimbursed for some of the counseling costs and things of that nature.
Actually, nothing really to add. Our services at WOAR, if a person after intake and assessment is ready for intensive trauma therapy, our services are free. We don't take insurance. However, we do have, as Vickie mentioned, a wait list because of that, and because we get a lot of requests for our work, particularly because we're the only rape crisis center in Philadelphia. But we will refer people out to other agencies in the city and try to help them navigate payments if an agency takes insurance or not.
Can I add to that as well? So just
Sure.
recently, last year in 2019, $5 million was added to the Victim Comp Fund as a result of the change in statutes of limitations in Pennsylvania, and the Office of Victim Services can actually assist in directing to where you can go to obtain those particular services if an event that someone cannot take advantage of the services that were offered that are free. There is a fund out there that's available to help survivors as well.
Thank you all. LaQuisha, while I have you there, I'll ask you and Eileen Horgan to answer the next question. It's coming from Matthew from Northern Liberties Neighborhood Association. Is there a system of protection in place for a victim who lives with their perpetrator and is unable to leave the home immediately for the safety of their children, etc.?
So ultimately, there are protection orders that those individuals can get access to that Captain Burgmann, it is one for domestic violence and one for sexual violence, and people can utilize those particular services or utilizing our police department. I know that many people don't necessarily want to go that route sometimes, but that might be a route that could be beneficial for individuals who are comfortable with involving the police in that domestic dispute.
And to add to that, I think if someone was in that position, that they could call either the domestic violence hotline or call the Women Against Abuse Legal Center directly to get some options about how they might be able to proceed and kind of safety planning around if they were intending to leave, what that looks like and where they would go and what resources are available to them. But certainly protection orders are one resource that could be available in that scenario.
Captain, you mind jumping in on this question as well?
That's exactly what I was going to say. That the PFA, you just get a PFA. And also you can reach out to the domestic violence hotline for advice and resources of what to do to make a plan and whatnot. But I think PFA is your best option because that will allow you to possibly evict the offender from the house.
Perhaps Captain or LaQuisha or Eileen, if you could, I know right now, of course, with COVID, there are some changes with the PFA process. Can you talk a little bit about that for someone who may show up to 1501 Arch Street? Can you talk a little about those changes?
Sure. So right now, a person who is seeking to file a protection order actually can't go to 1501 Arch to do so. There's two ways for them to do a protection order in normal business hours. The first way is through the phone. So someone would call the domestic violence filing unit and be connected with an intake worker who would assist them in preparing their petition. One thing that we have heard as a common refrain is that it's difficult to get through on that number. So we always encourage people who are having that difficulty to just keep calling. And if you are continuing to have difficulty, you should also call my office and we can help bridge that gap. But so that's the one way to file is by phone. The other way to file during normal Monday through Friday business hours is to complete prepared petitions and email them to the court email address. I have a one-page sheet I'm happy to share with this group about this process and with the phone numbers and email information. The third way that you can file for a protection order is at the emergency site. So after business hours, so after 5 p.m. to on weekends, you can file at the Criminal Justice Center basement, and that's the normal sort of emergency procedure.
All right, thank you so much. Our next question I'm gonna ask Branwen McNabb to respond to is coming from Minister Glenn Wilson, who is a chaplain in the 19th Police District, as well as an associate minister at the Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church. My question is regarding bail reduction for perpetrators accused of child abuse. While preparing to inform parents of new court dates, I saw many bails reduced to extremely low amounts from high amounts. Were these reductions the result of delays due to COVID-19?
So in terms of bail, ordinarily any cases with child victims would get much higher bail than some nonviolent offenses. And so if you're seeing a reduction in bail on child cases particularly, there may be some exceptions if there were health issues brought to the attention of the court. In that instance, bail may have been lowered. Most of the time, unless there was an extraordinary circumstance, there would be an objection from the district attorney's office. However, if bail was lowered, we always seek to make sure that the offender, there are restrictions in place once the offender is released from custody. So for instance, house arrest, where the house arrest unit would go out and make sure that there are no children in the home and the offender would not have any access to children. But for the most part, we have not seen a great reduction in bail on child sexual assault cases or child physical abuse cases during the COVID process.
Thank you, Branwen. I also ask you to respond to this next question, you and the captain as well. It's coming from Joe from 3rd District PDAC. What kind of changes to the way the criminal justice system handles these cases is the DAO considering? Mandatory arrests of both parties, removal of both parties from the home, crisis and intervention models by mental health providers. Just if you could respond to that a bit.
Sure. In issues with mandatory arrests of both parties, it's very rare. I'll defer to the captain to talk about specifics on police protocol, but the mandatory arrest of both parties, when the police arrive at the home, their objective is to figure out who the aggressor was and who should be held accountable for that aggression. So the object is not to get there and just take everybody into custody and figure it out later. It's to investigate the case and see who should be arrested. If there's an instance where both people are equal aggressors and both people need to be arrested, then that can happen, certainly. But for the most part, we do an individualized approach to each and every case. So it's hard to say in general terms that, we're moving to a system that is mandatory arrest for both parties or eviction of both parties. Those are very rare instances. And again, it's individualized approach of the investigator to determine, what happened and who should be held accountable. Captain, do you want to weigh in as well?
Yeah, I agree. They're very difficult jobs to handle. A lot of times it's hard to figure out who the aggressor actually was. A lot of times both parties are injured. But if you're going to arrest both parties, it's going to be difficult to get anybody to testify in court. If they're not going to be able to testify in court. So it's, as I say, it's difficult. But what's my train of thought there? What I want to say. But yeah, I believe we should arrest. I don't see any other alternative besides arrest. They're not going to stop. So you got to arrest and take them to custody. Tell them where you're going to make it stop.
Thank you, Captain. Thank you, ADA McNabb. Next question is coming from Kristen from 1st District PDAC. I'm going to ask Vickie, Dr. Howard, and LaQuisha to respond. What programs in Philadelphia are available to people who have suffered from emotional abuse?
So there are many trauma-focused agencies throughout the city of Philadelphia who are working with all victims, anyone who has experienced any emotional abuse or stress. And there's resources and lists that are available. If anyone were to contact PCA, we do have a comprehensive list of all of the agencies that have trauma therapists. A initiative throughout the city of Philadelphia began, I would say about 7-8 years ago, to train clinicians in trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy. So we have many clinicians throughout the city of Philadelphia who are trained in TFCBT and other modalities that are available to all victims throughout the city of Philadelphia. So we have lists available and anyone can contact us. We can provide them with the names of those agencies.
Absolutely the same at WAR. If you call the hotline, we will be able to provide you with references and referrals to other agencies where they have trauma-informed therapists and counselors to manage emotional distress. If your emotional distress is sexual violence related, then WAR has those same multi-certified multimodality therapists at our agency, as well as several support groups that could help manage emotional stress due to sexual violence.
Just like both of them have already stated, there are an array of different organizations within the city. And if you contact our offices, we can connect you with some of those particular organizations. There's an array of them. And just also what we would like to do is just to get people to see if their particular emotional distress is connected with sexual violence, domestic violence, or another form of violence where they might actually need some trauma-specific services. Then we would direct them to the trauma-specific services rather than just the emotional piece, because that is coupled with that particular experience. And if it's just emotional and dealt with outside of those particular forms of trauma, then we would direct them to the other services that provide just emotional specific help.
Thank you. We've had a few questions come into the chat, so I'm going to direct the questions since we have a little bit of time and we're running short on our pre-submitted questions. One of the questions is coming from Pedro Duran, a community member in South Philadelphia. His question is, during my time as a change agent, I've witnessed perpetrators with sexual offenses get less time than a person with a nonviolent offense, such as PWID. Why has there been so much leniency with these predators? To ask ADA Branwen McNabb to respond to that.
Sure. Thank you for that question. I have not seen that pattern. I'd be happy to talk with you about specifics if you want to give me a call offline. In general, though, nonviolent offenses are treated very differently than violent offenses and offenses where there are sexual in nature or domestic violence. So in general, I know that the office as a whole treats them very differently. And so if there's something specific about a specific concern that you're seeing, please feel free to give me a call and we can talk about that.
Brian, I'm gonna also give this one to you as well. It's coming from Joe from 3rd District PDAC. It's a quick follow-up to his previous question. He said, would the ADA be able to provide an approximate percentage of victims who fail to show up for court or withdraw the charges? The reason I asked the non-criminal justice approach question is to lessen the number of victims that fail to appear or don't want charges pressed.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't have a specific number for you. We do have a data lab that might be able to run that information for you. I can tell you, though, it's the percentages are very high of victims who are unwilling to proceed and fail to show up for court. And so, I think nationally it's somewhere around 70%, but don't quote me on that. But the numbers are extremely high. We do, in those instances where it's communicated to us that victims do not want to continue with prosecution, we have a conversation. We find out what's going on. Is it, is someone pressuring them? What is their concern? If we're able to make an offer of a lesser offense, we can certainly do that. And there are times when we use evidence-based prosecution. So we move forward in court without the victim, with officers' testimony and observations, with medical records and things of that nature. But, to your point, the percentage is quite high.
I'm going to ask Captain and Branwen if you both can respond to this next question. It's coming from Pastor Brian Jenkins. Brian is the founder and executive director for Chosen 300 Ministries at 11th and Spring Garden. He says, I have a client that said she was assaulted at age 17 in 2014. She said there was no intercourse, but she was kissed by an adult male. What can she do legally? How can I direct her? This forum was perfect timing.
I would direct her right to the Special Victims Unit. She's still within her ability to make a police report if that's something that she wants to pursue. I would have her call the Special Victims Unit directly. In terms of resources, you've got them, at your disposal here. We have the best advocacy groups. So I'd recommend that she touch base with WOAR if that's something that she's interested in.
What were the circumstances again?
One second here, Captain. I'm going to go back to that question.
Okay.
Pastor Jenkins says, I have a client that says she was assaulted at age 17 in 2014. She said there was no intercourse, but she was kissed by an adult male. What can she do legally, and how can I direct her? And he says this form was perfect timing.
Yeah, she can definitely refer her to Special Victims. That's fine. If he wants to reach out to me, that's fine also. I'll make sure it gets investigated. But yeah, definitely refer that to us, to Special Victims. We'll definitely look into it.
Thank you both. Our next question is coming from a CDC director. I'll ask Eileen and Dr. Howard, as well as LaQuisha, to respond to this. What alternative resources are available outside of 911 to support alternative options to calling police for assistance that will offer sustainable results and relief to victims?
For me, the first thing that comes up is the civil protection from abuse orders as being one option that is an alternative to pursuing seeking out police assistance and criminal intervention. It's a process that occurs in family court, and there are civil orders, so it's not part of a criminal case or a criminal record. However, violations are a crime, but the order itself is a civil order.
This is also, I believe, a good question. As people are moving more toward how do we work outside of 911, and that's the magic and the importance of advocacy organizations, in that we have a plethora of information and can provide a plethora of support. And so, the models state that when a victim of any crime, whether it's domestic violence or gun violence or sexual violence, contacts an advocacy organization with the information that they have and the support and the referrals, they are more likely to file a police report and do other continuances like, ADA, and maybe do a rape kit and things like that, because advocates' role in that instance is the provision of information and providing support. When people feel supported, they are more likely to do the other pieces. The end result is we want to get a criminal off the street, right? And with most rapes and sexual assaults, that's a serial rapist. We want to get them off the street. We're gonna do that by different ways and different measures, and travel on a different road, but that's our end result. And so if the advocacy organization is part of the initial response team, and that's a model that many cities have adopted across the nation, part of the initial response team, then we can support the entrance of the justice system and law enforcement and provide information to the victim.
I'll definitely echo with Dr. Howard and making sure that the individual is connected with an advocate. As she said, I'm not going to reiterate it any further, but ultimately, if someone is connected with an advocate in the beginning, they're more likely to go through the process. And it also gives that person autonomy and agency within themselves to provide them with the information and the resources that are available to them to allow them to make the choices that are best fit for them. We know that justice does not look the same for every individual, but ultimately as survivors would like to know what their options are, and they like to be in control of their situations. And oftentimes when advocates are not involved in the process, survivors often feel like they have no choice in doing and being the route, because it's not delivered in a way that allows for survivors to feel like they have agency over the experience and the journey that they take towards justice. So it's ultimately by making sure that the messaging is proper and allowing them to know that they have agency to choose whichever direction they would like to go in, and these are the options, and also ensuring that that person seeks medical attention and care, because that is so very important. And it does not necessarily, it gives the option that if an event that they want to seek justice later, that those things are actually in place. And many people might not be ready to seek that road to justice in the very beginning, but after a while they might want to revert back to that. And if an event they don't take advantage of seeking medical treatment and care like rape kits done, that then sometimes that evidence is lost. And we want to urge to people that you don't have to necessarily report in that time frame, but you should ultimately get medical attention and care, prophylactics, things of that nature, to make sure that they are doing well in a medical standpoint as well. So yeah.
Thank you. Next question is coming from a police captain here in Philadelphia. I'll ask Captain Burgmann and ADA Branwen McNabb to respond. Although victims of sexual assault often shower or bathe immediately after a sexual assault, should they be advised to wait until a rape kit is performed?
Yes, we would definitely advise them to wait to have a rape kit. That being said, you know, it is sort of a natural impulse, right, to want to shower immediately, get clean immediately. And I would never want anyone to not seek a forensic medical examination because they've showered. So the research shows that up to 72 hours, we have a very good chance of getting DNA. We have gotten DNA on cases, even where someone has showered. I believe the research shows it's up to 5 days, although the success rates are lower. But we never want to discourage anyone from having a forensic medical examination, whether or not that they've showered. Obviously, all things being equal, we would not want them to shower, but you know, certainly don't let that prevent you from having a rape kit done right at the Philadelphia Sexual Assault Response Center, which is at Special Victims Unit. Additionally, clothing is very important. So the clothing you were wearing at the time, preserve that as well. And you know, that evidence, we seek a lot of evidence and get a lot of evidence from the clothing worn at the time of the assault.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Ideally, we want them not to shower, not to change anything, preserve all the evidence. If you do shower, it's not a lost cause. As Branwen said, 3 days is the window, 5 is the extreme window. We've had success with that, but not a lot. But they can still recover evidence whether you showered or not. I agree with the clothing also. We have a lot of success recovering forensics and getting codicits off clothing. Also, the lab has gotten better and better. If you shower, you're going to remove evidence from your skin. You may have been grabbed or touched, and they're getting very good at getting E-cells and DNA off of your body. So that can be very successful too. So, like I said, it would be best if you didn't shower. It's not a lost cause if you did.
Next question is going to be for Dr. Howard and LaQuisha Anthony. What service provisions are specifically provided to for Black LGBTQIA+ community members who have experienced domestic violence or assault?
Sure. As we've seen over the last couple of years, unfortunately, there's been an uptick in murders to Black trans women. And the data also says that Black trans women experience rape and sexual assault at a higher rate. And so we do have at WOAR a LGBTQ support group that meets weekly, that is moved to a virtual format due to COVID. All of our support groups have. And so that support group meets Wednesday. You can call our hotline to find out specific information on that. The thing I really like about WOAR, not only because I work there and have a phenomenal team, but it's because we are responsive to the community. And so we take feedback very seriously. And at any point in time, we see feedback that says you need more of this and less of this, then we are more than happy and willing to do that. And so because of that, we do have a health educator on our education team that is our LGBTQ specialist. that trains WAR staff, as well as we work with Mazzoni Center on a grant that we have together, train other service organizations in the city of Philadelphia to ensure that they're competent around LGBTQ issues. And if we need to expand and grow and do other things and do things differently to demonstrate that demonstrate our competency, then we're more than happy to do so. Thank you for that question.
So here at V.O.I.C.E, we primarily focus on those who identify as a woman, but we do have direct connection and partnership with organizations, both grassroots and other organizations like WAR that do service those who are LGBTQ and who ultimately are Black. We ultimately want to make sure that we're empowering all individuals. That's something that we do. Our form of empowerment and events are focused on all individuals, but we do have specific relationships with individuals from other groups that we can give a warm handoff to say that this is definitely a safe organization that will help to provide the needs of that individual.
Thank you. And this is our last question. I'll ask Eileen, Horgan, Dr. Howard, and LaQuisha to respond to. Do you think the Violence Against Women Act will be dismantled? And if so, when?
We do know that it's stable up until 2021. We also know that it's just dependent upon who's in office on November the 3rd. One of the first things that was mentioned after the inauguration in 2017 was VAWA and VOCA dollars, and that was really scary. Those dollars were also contingent upon monies coming from other places as well. And so again, we are assured that through 2021 it'll be fine. I'm hoping for at least a level of flat funding after that. I'll be happy with whatever we get in order to continue our services, but we don't know what's going to happen on the other side of 2021.
Yes, I'll just add that we know that the reauthorization of VAWA has stalled out in the Senate, and if you go to the womenagainst.abuse.org website, we have a Take Action Center, and it can facilitate you contacting your senator to urge them to support the reauthorization of VAWA.
Yeah, I echo with what those ladies said as well. We don't know when, and we don't know what the future necessarily holds, but I would say to those who are survivors and those who are fighting for survivors to continue to fight for that, because we know that we can't do this work without the dollars. And we know that already sexual violence is an issue that does not get enough money already. So if an event that those dollars are actually taken, that will be a big hit for many of the organizations, and many of those organizations serve our communities and the communities that ultimately don't have access to a lot of support and treatment. So we want to ensure that we continue to make our voices being heard, calling and contacting our senators and those who are in office to make sure that we continue to keep those dollars in effect and continue to keep the act going, because it's necessary and it's needed.
I'm sorry, I'm still muted. So just want to thank all of our panelists for answering those pre-submitted questions. We've had several representatives from elected official offices across our city. I just want to acknowledge them. Few were on for the majority of the time, but it jumped off. But we still have one on as well. We had Ann Kelly King from council member Squilla's office, as well as Charlene Samuels from council member Helen Gim's office, as well as Ethel Waters from Senator Anthony Williams' office. So I want to acknowledge that they were here. But Tiffany Wilson is present from Senator Vincent Hughes' office. And Tiffany, we made you a panelist, and so feel free to please unmute yourself. And if you want to give some remarks on behalf of the senator. Good to have you, Tiffany.
Good to be here. Thank you. The computer shocked me. I was like, wait, something's moving. What's happening? Good afternoon, everyone. Senator Hughes had a scheduling conflict, but of course, our office is represented. I want to thank you, and let you know that we're extremely grateful and indebted to those who provide advocacy and service to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. This town hall was informative and very helpful. Oftentimes, our staff are on the other end of a call, or they're sitting across the desk from someone who is at a crossroads, or a caregiver who doesn't know how to help someone in their family or in their community. So we are always looking for resources so that we can be able to direct them to the professionals that can help them efficiently and effectively. So I just want you to know that you can count on Senator Hughes to continue to be a champion and a trusted messenger for information and services. And as always, he's always in Harrisburg fighting for additional funding, for resources, housing, and things of that nature for those who have experienced domestic violence and sexual assault. So if you need anything, please feel free to call our office. I'll give you the number, 215-879-7777 is the district office number. Our office is currently still closed to in-person visitors, but if you call and leave a message on the voicemail, a staff person will contact you right away, and then we can get moving on whatever it is that you may need. So thank you for having me.
Tiffany, thank you so much, and please send our greetings to the Senator on behalf of DA Larry Krasner. I'm gonna ask each of our panelists if you can just give final remarks. We have provided your information into the chat section or the chat feature, but 88 Branwen, McNabb, Captain Mark Burgmann, Eileen Horgan, Dr. Monique Howard, LaQuisha Anthony, and Vickie Melvin in that order. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you about these issues. Please don't hesitate to contact us with anything more specific or any further information you need. And you know, the work that we do can't be done alone. So it's tremendous that you are here and you're having this conversation with us, and we thank you for your participation. Captain?
Okay. Hi, this is Captain Mark Burgmann. Yeah, as I said before, this is a very important topic, so I'm glad we had a conversation. Thank you, I appreciate it. I'll give you my contact information. My phone number is 215-685-3260. My email address is mark.burgmann@phila.gov. The Burgmann is spelled B-U-R-G-M-A-N-N. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for allowing me to share on this panel. I really appreciate hearing from everyone and the important work that's being done across the city with other various organizations in the DA's office to address domestic and sexual violence, and I look forward to continuing this work with you all.
Thank you very much for allowing me to participate this evening and this afternoon. I look forward to our continued work. I look forward to working in community as we reduce sexual violence in the city of Philadelphia. And I always look forward to our continued work with the partner agencies that are on this panel. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to give a message for anyone that may be a survivor out there to note that there are tons of resources, as you've already seen today, and there is support for you out there. And if you would like to connect with V.O.I.C.E, the information is available to you. And I thank you to all the partners who are continuing to work on behalf of survivors, even in the midst of COVID-19, and knowing that when we come out of COVID-19, that we might see an influx, and that we'll be ready to make sure that we're supporting survivors during that time.
Thank you so much for having us and allowing us to be a part of this conversation, keeping in mind that there are young people and children who are experiencing sexual assault and abuse and violence, and always keeping them in mind, and also the caregivers, because our role is to support them. We need a believing, non-offending caregiver to be able to help our young people towards the path of healing and justice. So thank you again.
Again, on behalf of DA Larry Krasner and our entire team at the DA's office, thank you to all the panelists, our partners, both at the police department and across the community. Thank you all who are residents and stakeholders of South, Southwest, West, and Center City. Thank you all for being on today. Have a great one.